Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Nvidia daily update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over the stock, let's go over the market, let's talk about Nvidia, let's see what is happening with the stock and what we can essentially expect moving into, well, really the rest of the week more or less, right? So as usual, if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. And of course, if you enjoy my technical analysis, thoughts on the charts, etc., well, I do share my thoughts with my members, constantly sharing my just, updates, thoughts on the charts, technical analysis updates as the market is trading every single day. In my membership section. Link is below if you're interested. Just $3 a month for access to mainly my Tesla updates, sometimes other stocks as well, or $5 a month gives you access to the first tier plus the second tier, which includes Nvidia if you're interested. But jumping into it, Nvidia closing the day up, a humble, we'll say 3%. I say humble because the market is up 2%. So Nvidia, in my opinion, actually slightly disappointingly, I would even argue, underperforming the market today a little bit, closing at $121.50 per share. And it's a bit of a bittersweet thing because 3% is still 3%. Hey, that's pretty good, right? That's pretty good. The shares I got over here are obviously pretty happy about that, but I definitely expected a little bit more from Nvidia, to be completely honest with you. I thought it would go up a little bit more on a day like today, especially. It didn't, but does that mean it's all bad news? No, not necessarily, right? Not necessarily. So what do we have moving forward with Nvidia? So let's start off with the 1 hour chart, right? The 1 hour is becoming one of my favorite time frames because you can look at the 1 hour for like short term and even longer term movement. Honestly, it's pretty strong. But 1 hour, obviously, we had the majority of last week. We had this massive, kind of bullish pennant, if you will, forming where we kept getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And obviously, we had a nice gap up breakout today of the bullish pennant. So theoretically, that should be good news, right? And it still is, don't get me wrong, but the follow through needs to be a little bit better, right? So what does Nvidia need to do to get better follow through, right? In my opinion, what it needs to do is essentially, let these emails catch up, which is fine, nothing wrong with that. But it pretty much wants to, ideally, in my opinion, take this little range right here that we acted as a resistance and a bit of a resistance even over here. You can see on the morning breakout before we actually finally push up higher. And it wants to essentially take that level and turn it back into support. So essentially, what that actually means in English is I want to see it hold about 121, give or take $1, right? 120 to 122, we'll say. How about that? Make it simple. 120 to 122. I want it to hold around there, right? That to me is the ideal scenario. If it can hold about 120 to 122, let's say tomorrow and maybe even Wednesday, or however long it decides to take, and really try to confirm that back as a support, essentially, I don't know how long it'll take. Could just be tomorrow morning. Could be most of tomorrow. Could be tomorrow and Wednesday. Maybe it's even longer. I don't know how long it'll take. But as long as they can continue to essentially take this region over here and, more or less just turn it back into support and confirm it, hey, that's not bad, right? That's looking, in my opinion, still, pretty good, right? That's potential. If it decides to go a little bit weaker, if things don't go, as perfectly, the next level I'd want to see a hold will be somewhere around down here, which would be closer to actually 120 itself, to maybe even peeking our head, about into the, 119s. So we'll say 119 roughly, give or take also $1. So 118 to 120. So there's two decent support areas down below that, Nvidia does have a good potential to hold essentially and turn it back into support, kind of find that, footing, if you will, and make its way higher, right? So those are the main two regions I would look for while still maintaining my bullish thesis. Now, obviously, another way to maintain my bullish thesis is essentially as long as these EMAs stay crossed. Because you can see, right, if I go back to the 1 hour and zoom in like this right here, you can see while we were doing this massive consolidation in this very large pennant and we were making higher lows, lower highs, you can see the whole time, the whole time, the EMAs remained bullish. And in other words, the green and the red, the 921 respectively, all stayed above the 50 EMA, which is the white line, right? During the whole consolidation. So essentially another way of looking at it, if to make it maybe even more simple, if you will, is as long as these EMAs continue to stay flip bullish like that and they don't essentially both start crossing on the 1 hour below the 50 EMA, hey, that's also not bad, right? That shows potential, if you will. So those are the main things I'm looking at. I still think the bulls should, in theory, have control here, right? I don't see how the bears have control here, not yet at least. I think the bulls still have the upper hand. We still have, a bullish breakout out of this bullish pennant. We still have the EMAs turned back or turned bullish, if you will. They're still crossed to the bullish side. We still have these support levels down below that should, of course, act as a good support for Nvidia to find its footing before it potentially wants to finally make that way leg higher. So I still give the bulls the upper hand, personally speaking, not financial advice, just my opinion. But what happens next? Let's say the bulls, maybe Nvidia consolidates for another day or two. Well, okay, great. What's after that, right? Okay, we hold this area. Great. Where do we go next though, right? What's the next step? Well, that's where I start bringing out, for instance, the 1 hour. You can zoom out even, right? The 1 hour is pretty powerful, but that would be the next step. The next step would be, first of all, I'd want to see a break of about 122 to as high as 123, right? That first of all needs to break, this little region right here. That needs to break. If that also breaks, then I can see Nvidia definitely making its way higher to my main targets, closer to about 126 is my first main target, which is maybe even closer to 125/126, which is where the 50 daily EMA is currently sitting. Potentially as high as closer to 130 itself, which will be this massive area of resistance right over here, right? And of course, getting close to that trend line resistance as well. So that'll be my main two levels that I'll be looking for upside. Again, about 125, 126, which coincides with the 50 daily EMA, but it really wouldn't shock me, assuming the market follows suit and the market confirms to rally essentially and keeps making its way higher, and the whole market doesn't decide to collapse once again because of Trump or something like that. I really wouldn't be surprised to see high 120s to maybe even tapping closer to 130 itself, which again would bring us closer to the upper end. The upper end of the downward channel. So those are my main two targets moving forward, assuming we continue holding. Now, let's just talk about the downside. Let's say Nvidia doesn't hold, right? Let's say it loses the daily 21 EMA that it's holding. Let's say it loses even the 9 or the 8 EMA. And let's say it just starts dropping below these levels. It starts dropping below 119, 118, something like that, right? Starts losing these pretty important levels, in my opinion. What happens next? Well, and that's where things will get a little bit, spicier. Pretty much if we really start losing 118, I would say, that's where it really starts getting concerning. That's where we most likely make our way back down closer to this 115 region, potentially all the way down to 112. And honestly, that's where the daily comes back out again. And there is a potential that we once again come all the way down to the bottom end of this channel, the bottom end of the channel, I should say, which depending on how quick it happens, can definitely take Nvidia sub 100. Now, obviously those are still big ifs. We have to lose some pretty crucial levels for that to actually become something to, worry about, if you will, from the more bullish perspective. But that is something to consider if we start losing those levels. As it stands right now, my personal opinion is the fact that I think the bulls have the upper hand still. I do think the bulls still hold control, if you will, over the stock, at least for the short term, right? For those targets that I mentioned just now. And that's kind of what I'm staying with, the thesis I'm staying with. Now, very quickly taking a look at the weekly. The weekly is a bit of a mess. I'm not gonna lie. The weekly, the reason my positions on Nvidia, at least right now, I have a position. I am up on it, et cetera, et cetera. Shares, which I actually did sell cover calls as a hedge. But the reason I'm a little overall, I would say, iffy, if you will, bullish, but not overwhelmingly bullish, more cautiously bullish, I would add, as a better way to put it, is the weekly. I'm still not a huge fan of the weekly. Now, there is still potential that this weekly turns around. I just don't like the fact that we're dancing consistently this close to the 50, constantly threatening to close below it. We're still at the bottom end of this rising wedge. The EMAs up here, the 21 and the 8 have crossed bearish. I'm seeing all these things, and it's okay, I guess. It's not bad, but it's not great. It's okay. It's an okay look on the weekly for me here. It's okay. It's all right. But it doesn't instill a lot of confidence in me, at least as of right now. What will instill a lot of confidence is if we actually start breaking essentially past 130. If Nvidia starts breaking 130, not only is it going to be recapturing these EMAs, which at that point, as long as we continue holding above here and maybe even go higher, we'll also start getting them to cross back to being bullish. The 8 is above the 21. That's even better, right? Which is, kind of what I did pretty much all here. But that would also, a break of 130 would on the daily break out of this downward channel that has been haunting Nvidia for quite some time now, right? Ultimately, quite some time, pretty much for since the end of last year, ultimately, right? And all of this year so far, right? So those are the things I want to see on the stock, really. Like that's what would give me more confidence longer term, or midterm even, I would say, honestly, even midterm, medium term, that the stock wants to, ultimately continue higher, like actually higher, not just like, to 126 or even 130. I mean, like all-time highs kind of higher, like actual all-time highs, meaningfully higher, right? Not just these kind of short-term games, if you will. So those are the main things I'm kind of eyeballing. I still think the stock short-term looks bullish. It's just the medium term to potentially even longer term. We're coming up on a crucial area here where, Nvidia either gets a substantial rejection from here and back down we go, or it will finally break out, finally break above the weekly EMAs, finally break above the daily EMAs and get out of this downward channel, right? And that pretty much all lies around, honestly, about 130, give or take, depending on when it actually happens. So that's just kind of how I'm looking at it. Again, that's just my opinion. That's just how I'm looking at it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something I'm missing. There's a possibility. I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means, but that's just kind of the way I'm looking at it right now for Nvidia moving forward, right? So let's see how that actually plays out. Another way we can look at Nvidia, of course, moving forward, and the good old Bollinger Bands. You can see we have officially reverted back to the mean, right? Nvidia, of course, was very, very oversold. You can see as it was hugging the bottom end of the Bollinger Band. And what did it do? It's pretty much right back at the mean. The mean reversion has officially completed for Nvidia, something that Tesla also actually even completed today, technically speaking. So, a lot of stocks did revert back to the mean. I think even like Amazon, has reverted, Google, and a lot of things have reverted back to the mean from being very, very oversold. So it really all hinges on the market as well. So let's just see how it actually plays out moving forward. But the upper end of the Bollinger Band is also sitting around 130. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see high 120s closer to 130. Like that wouldn't shock me by the end of, I don't know, maybe even by the end of this week. Probably not by the end of this week. Maybe it will. I don't know. Hard to say when. Could be the end of this week. Could be maybe next week. Hard to say. But crucial level at 130. That's the level, in my opinion, the bulls, really want to start looking to break. And yeah, let's see how that plays out. But all in all, thank you so much for watching. Take a look actually very quickly at the options flow. Let's see what's happening over here on Nvidia, on the options flow. And yeah, I mean, the bulls have a slight upper hand here. The bulls, some puts came in towards the end of the day, short-term puts as well for this Friday. But the bulls definitely still have the overall upper hand throughout the actual flow. And Nvidia does have almost 30 million confirmed bullish flow. So, the bulls are trying to step in. It's just the momentum so far, at least short-term, has been a little bit, lackluster. I'll be honest. Has been a little bit weaker than I would have liked to see. Absolutely. So, but that can change. You never know. So let's see. But all in all, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Peace.